Hi and welcome back. In this lecture, we can talk about Key Insight 5, the digital transformation of the healthcare industry. Well, if you look at digital transformation, it's happening to all the industries all around the world. With the exponential growth of technology and creating so many opportunities and creating a truly life in abundance situation where people can have so many products and services at their fingertips. So if you look at the healthcare industry, transformation of different processes, and we are even noticing different industries coming together to apply healthcare related technologies to those. Well, one such industry is the femtech industry. So Femtech is basically a group of apps, diagnostics, products and services which use technology that focus on women's health. So a few applications in Femtech includes things like fertility solutions, period tracking apps, pregnancy and nursing care, women's sexual wellness and reproductive system healthcare. And also, it's estimated that the global femtech market is projected to reach $75.1 billion in the year 2025. So this industry is trying to break a lot of barriers when it comes to things like improving the delivery of care and also facilitating self-care. And another major barrier that it's trying to break down, it's directly addressing stigmatized topics like periods and menopause, and also the ability to deliver culturally sensitive and tailored care, and also breaking down barriers like better understanding women's needs and reducing gender inequality as well. Then we have wearables. So wearables are devices which can detect, analyze and transmit data, including things like heart rate, blood oxygen levels. So for example, things like your Fitbit device which can track heart rates, and even your Apple Watch which can track things like blood oxygen levels, your sleeping patterns and all these sensor data. So wearables can facilitate what we call proactive care, meaning it can intelligently understand and anticipate what kind of situation that you will face. For example, if you don't sleep well, you might have high stress levels, and if you have a very high heart rate, it can indicate things like high blood pressure. So all these things can be monitored. So furthermore, this can monitor things like heart rate, calories burnt, steps walked, blood pressure, release of certain biochemicals, sleep, time spent exercising, seizures and even physical strains. And these devices are getting very smart, so it can automatically contact first responders like ambulances if it detects that you are going through a medical emergency. It's also facilitating applications like forecasting mood changes, stress and health, measuring blood alcohol content, athletic performance, and also how sick the wearer is, long-term monitoring especially for the people who are getting long-term care and the elderly. And then also it can perform things like health risk assessment, automated documentation of care activities. For example, it will have all the data visualizations and all the granular data of how your heart rate has changed over time, giving the doctors a valuable data source and insights on how things went wrong. Then we're also noticing the convergence of apparel, healthcare, and also smart electronics. So we're seeing smart clothing, which is basically miniature electronic components and devices which are embedded in apparel, which can communicate with wearables like smartwatches, smartphones, and tablets, and also capture data like whether you've been exercising, whether you've been sleeping, the release of certain biochemicals, and all these things. So smart clothing is made possible by the advances in things like material science, where we can now add metallics, optical fibers, and conductive polymers to clothing that allows sensory capabilities, so the entire fabric can sense whether you're moving, and also things like data transmission and electric conductivity. So some of the smart clothing are designed using additive manufacturing or what we call 3D printing, and some smart clothing is now capable of producing electricity from body movements rather than relying on rechargeable batteries and other sorts of power. Then talking a bit more about more digital transformations of the healthcare industry, we have what we call continuous and remote diagnostics, where we can now test, track and trace patients remotely, and also use technologies like video conferencing to consult them and give the medication. So this is very useful for especially long-term care patients, so people who are elderly and people who are differently abled and people who are bedridden. Then we have other applications like teletherapy, so things like mental illnesses and other behavioral therapies are now using digital technologies like video conferencing for remote therapy. So now you are no longer restricted to the doctors and other healthcare professionals in your area. So if you don't have resources, you can easily go online and consult a certified therapist and do the therapy sessions via Zoom or some kind of video conferencing platform. Then we're also starting to see the trend of virtual fitness and gyms, especially if you look at the whole COVID-19 pandemic and all the lockdowns that happened all around the world. People were forced to stay inside. So a lot of gyms and other fitness centers were shut down, forcing them to evolve and change their business models. So now the world has started to open up and gyms and fitness centers are opening back again. But also, there's a certain portion of people who would prefer the comfort of their own home when it comes to working out. So fitness instructors and gyms are using tools like Zoom, Facebook groups, and even virtual reality, where you basically wear something like a goggles which has a display and use a few handheld controllers in order to navigate around the virtual world. So businesses are now using these technologies to engage and connect with their clients as well. So what are a few benefits of digital transformation in the healthcare industry? The first is better healthcare professional and patient coordination because people can much more easily interact with things like virtual technologies, book appointments using things like smartphone apps and websites rather than going to a physical place to book an appointment. So there are lots of conveniences when it comes to using digital technologies, and also less human errors because verification systems can be built right into those systems to ensure that information accuracy is much more higher than traditional methods. Then we have things like automation of administrative tasks, resulting in professionals focusing on value-adding tasks. So if you look at the healthcare industry, there are so many documentations that's happening. Everything must be logged, everything must be stored, everything must be analyzed. So there are so much of administrative tasks which are performed by healthcare professionals. So digital transformation would significantly reduce their workload in terms of automating them and leaving much more value-adding tasks for the professionals. Then we have things like reducing risk and human errors because using things like artificial intelligence would significantly reduce the number of risks and errors because systems can understand and interpret whether certain parameters have exceeded or whether any kind of ad hoc situation is detected, any anomalies are detected, making things much more easier for people. Then we have other benefits like improved clinical conclusions. So artificial intelligence enabled decision support systems would certainly help healthcare professionals to make much more better choices, also to understand the implications of their decisions, and also make patients comfortable about certain procedures and therapeutics and medication, and improving the overall patient experience. Then we have things like access to a single source real-time health information. So traditionally, healthcare information is stored as per the provider, and if you change to another provider, information is usually lost or not transmitted properly. So there might be businesses which are reluctant to share the information because it can leak sensitive information and trade secrets and all the wrong things that they might have done or performed. But with digital transformation, we can truly make it happen by using things like blockchain technology, which is immutable. So blockchain technology is a system for recording information in a way that it makes it very difficult to change or alter or delete the system records. Then another benefit would be better handling of medical emergencies. So technologies like artificial intelligence is able to forecast much more accurately and predict when certain things will happen and then take the necessary steps, whether it's deploying the resources, whether it's deploying the emergency personnel to reduce the loss of human life and suffering. Then we have better improved workflow for all stakeholders. So things like automated work scheduling for the healthcare professionals, understanding their stress levels and adjusting the workload accordingly. So all these things can be done using technology. And finally, we have better collaboration, so we can get institutions, government regulatory authorities, and healthcare professionals on one single page so that everyone is aware of the new changes, existing rules and regulations, and all these things, and promote much more better and sustainable growth for the entire healthcare industry. Then let's talk about a few challenges of adopting digital transformation or implementing digital transformation. The first is the complications regarding access to healthcare data. So if you look at healthcare data, it's very sensitive because it has all the conditions that a patient might have. Even it can contain the patient's genome. So that's extremely scary and also extremely sensitive because if you leak it or it gets into the wrong hands, there's no turning back. So there must be strong legal regulatory frameworks to protect that data and also strong frameworks to ensure accountability if something goes wrong. Then we have other challenges like inconsistencies of data and data structures between providers. One healthcare provider might store data in one way, another might store it in another way. So if you want to aggregate this, it's extremely complex and challenging because we need an aggregated picture for decision makers in order to make the better decisions, whether it's importing certain drugs or increasing the nutritional levels within a community or a country. So all these things must be considered. Then we have privacy concerns. So patients might be reluctant to share their medical information because it's very sensitive, and also patients want to feel rest assured that their data is in the safe hands as well. Then we have cybersecurity concerns, which is any major concern as far as any information technology system is concerned. So how do we prevent things like ransomware, where patients' highly sensitive information is being kept at a ransom, as well as so many other malwares? Then we have things like financial restrictions. So certain healthcare providers might not have the expertise and the money to invest in digital transformation because it requires a significant amount of financial investment as well. Then we have the regulatory and legal concerns. So data protection, data regulation, data storage, data analytics, and also sharing data with third parties. Is it allowed and at what conditions? So all these things must be considered. And finally, we have things like user acceptance and other organizational challenges. So are the users comfortable in using these advanced tools? Do they have the right skill set? What about their compute literacy? And does the organization have the right infrastructure in place? For example, things like reliable electricity, a good internet connection, and other networking capabilities. So all these things must be considered. Well, that's about it for Key Insight 5, the digital transformation of the healthcare industry. I'll see you on another lecture.